Alright folks, today we are doing our unit test review. Covers chapter 2 and 3. First we're going to go over chapter 2. This is unit 2, population and migration. So that's kind of the topic of choice today. Unit 2, population and migration. Okay, and so as we're looking at population and migration, there's a couple of things we're going to get into. First off, what is arithmetic density? Arithmetic density is think arithmetic, it's just a number. It's the number of people per square mile. Number of people per square mile. What are the 4 most populous regions? I want you guys to think for a second where, I will say this, they sound super redundant when you say them all together. Because we have East Asia, South Asia, ironically, Southeast Asia, and Western Europe. Are the most populous areas in the world. Now, when we're talking about what's the most populous country in the world, there's only one country here that we're talking about, and that is China. Now, as we're talking about population and large populations, we're going to get in a little bit into what is overpopulation. Overpopulation is you have your population exceeds your resources. Now, one of the reasons we started having overpopulation, especially in some countries, is because people stopped dying. Weird but true story. And remember in stage 1 of the DTM, we talked about how in stage 1 of the DTM we have high birth rate, but then there's also high death rate because everyone's dying. Well, then the medical revolution happens. The medical revolution happens, and people stop dying so frequently because there's better medicine and more advancements, which means a higher life expectancy. Now, when we're looking at doubling time and how doubling time is calculated, doubling time is how long it takes to double the population. Sorry, I keep like changing colors, but I'm on a pattern here, so I feel like I should still write with blue. How long it takes to double a population. And the equation is 70 over the natural increase rate. And that will tell us what our doubling time is. That tells us what our doubling time is per country. Now, we're looking at what sort of countries have high CBRs. CBR stands for crude birth rate. So a high crude birth rate, those would probably be LDCs. LDCs. This is a super interesting review because I feel like I'm not gonna lie, it's not super cohesive, but it's kind of hopping all around the place and it's getting our brains moving. What region of the world do most human populations avoid? Fun fact: people don't like to be where it is cold, where it is wet, where it is in fact too dry, or highlands. These are places people avoid. Someone was like, people don't like to be where it's too hot. I was like, we have air conditioning, we'll survive. But think Siberia, think we're talking wet, we're talking like a swampland. People don't live in the swamps. They live swamp adjacent, but not necessarily in the swamps. Next up, let's look at what is physiological density? What is physiological density? It's the number of people per arable farmland, which means how many people do we have per land that is inhabitable, people could actually live on it. Then agricultural density takes that one step further. Think agriculture, farmer. Agriculture is the number of farmers per arable farmland. Now, what is the agricultural revolution? Well, the agricultural revolution happened about 8,000 years ago. It happened about 8,000 years ago, and it was the beginning of farming. 8,000 years ago was the beginning of farming, and that's when people started creating settlements. We had an increase in births, a decrease in death, because people didn't have to. It wasn't so much like if you don't make the journey, you won't have any food, and then you die. It was a little bit more. We can stay stationary. We can stay in one place. We can there's more food and food available to everyone. The Industrial Revolution, that's about in the 1900s, where we had better medicine. But most importantly, there was not just better medicine because we had better technology, but also there was an increased life expectancy because we all of a sudden had all this technology to keep us safe and to find things, and people had jobs, and people had the ability to, the word I'm looking for, people had the ability to kind of control their own destiny a little bit more, because when you have your own job, you can work, you have your own money, things like that. How is natural increase rate calculated? The NIR. Natural increase rate, NIR, if you will, equals CBR, the crude birth rate, minus the crude death rate. That's how we calculate it. Okay, up here. What stage of the DTM has the highest natural increase rates? Which means this is the part of the DTM that goes like this. Like it's shoop, 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 as like the steepest line. The steepest line. The one that has the steepest line would be actually stage 2. Stage 1 kind of looks like this. Stage 2 is a really steep slope. Now, because of that that it also has the highest birth rate, because it has a really high birth rate, but not a lot of people are dying now. So that's also stage 2. Now, what stage of the DTM has the highest crude death rate? Most amount of people that are dying on the regs. Upsetting. That would be stage 1. That would be stage 1 with diseases like the Black Plague. Something you need to be able to do is you need to be able to predict a country's stage in the DTM based on crude birth rate and crude death rate. Like if it said these things like highest crude birth rate, highest crude death rate, which one has like the lowest birth rate? Lowest birth rate would be like stage 4. Be able to make predictions about a country's population based on its population pyramid. We've talked about these. This would be like these, or maybe it's like a college town, or whatever it may be. Be able to look at that and also predict the stages. Like this is a stage 2. A stage 3 is like, it looks kind of like a Hershey Kiss because it's starting to go down, but like it's not quite there yet. And then stage 4, it's like it's kind of vaguely even. Like it's pretty, I don't know how even that is, but it kind of looks a little bit boxy. That's stage 2, 3, 4, and we're pretending that stage 5 is still in theory, still theoretical. Malthus's theory on overpopulation. His belief was that if we weren't careful, if we didn't watch ourselves, population was going to exceed food supply. Population would exceed food supply. And then everybody would basically die. And it would be really sad. And that's 2 eyes and a sad face. Now, what he didn't predict was that where's most of the world's population growth happening? It's happening in LDCs, which he did not predict because they don't have access to birth control or contraception. Now that was something that he could not predict. How has the concept of ecumen changed over time? Ecumen, all the things. Okay. Ecumen, it has changed over time because we're able to live on more of the Earth's land. Able to live on more land because of improvements in technology. Now, why do women in India have so many children? Women in India have a lot of children because they're very much so pressured for sons. It is kind of like a male-driven society in that sense. There's pressure to have a son. So if you have a lot of daughters, you might keep going until you get a son. Young marriage. High infant mortality rates. They have an issue with high infant mortality rates, and they're primarily a farming or agrarian society. So it could be that your children work on the farm. And you also need to be able to compare and describe different stages of the DTM. That's something else you'll have to do for your test. Okay, so that is all number 2. We got only 11 minutes. Shoot. Keep going, guys. Keep going. Alright, so now for this next one we're looking at is Chapter 3, Migration, Test Review. So when we're looking at migration, hopefully when you do the matching here, mobility, the ability to be mobile, the ability to be able to move. Mobile, when we look over here, all types of movement from one place to another. So they also think what slows down movement. So things that would hinder mobility could be like your age, your social status, money. It could also be access to a car, how fast you can walk, what kind of transportation are you using. For migration is the permanent move to a new location. Migration is a permanent move to a new location. That's G. Boop, boop. We're going somewhere new. Counter-urbanization. Think of Miss Puckett's parents. I showed you guys a picture of their house. Basically, it's this new kind of movement that's happening primarily in MDCs. Where people are migrating from urban areas to rural areas. Just like when my parents moved to Hockley. Now, suburbanization is something that happens in MDCs as well as people reach about stage 3, stage 4, where people want to change in lifestyle, so they move from the city to the suburbs. Guest workers. We talked about guest workers, migrant workers, as a huge problem in what continent? Think about it for a second. Alright, so I hope you came up with C, citizens of poor countries who get jobs in Western Europe or the Middle East. These are people who come in, remember they were primarily getting jobs in they're primarily coming from like North Africa, and they send money back to their country. It's very helpful. Next up, the brain drain. We've talked a lot about the brain drain, and this is large-scale emigration. People leave that are really talented. Large-scale migration of very talented people. That immigration is when your immigration exceeds your emigration. M is in, E for exit. So that's in. Net out migration is when the people leaving exceed the amount of people coming in. This usually is in MDCs. This is usually in LDCs. It's all the same. Alright, so match the stage with the type of migration. Okay, because remember, this is that guy, I think his name's Zelensky. If it's not Zelensky, it's something that kind of sounds like it, and so I'm going to scratch it out and pretend that I didn't say anything because this is going on the internet, and the internet is forever. Counter-urbanization, when does that happen? That happens in MDCs. So we can kind of do an option here. It could be stage 3 or stage 4. Suburbanization, people moving from the cities to the suburbs, which are already developed. So that would also be stage 3 or stage 4. Primitive migration, like nomads, that would be stage 1. International migration, people that like leave your country entirely, be stage 2. The safety valve, that's kind of like what the U.S. was to Europe during the Industrial Revolution. We acted as like a safety valve for them, and that's because they were in stage 2. And the move from rural to urban, you can't have an urban area unless your cities are kind of developed, and so this is going to be more so in stage 3. Okay, so all the things are happening. Go on the back side. Checking my time because I got 6 minutes of my class period left before my 7th period comes in. Oh, yeah, fam. So next up, we're looking at why do refugees migrate? Refugees are usually fleeing a dangerous situation. Generally, the most common thing is they're fleeing a dangerous. They're fleeing dangerous political conditions usually. Sometimes religious too, though. Now, what did Ravenstein do? Ravenstein made a series of laws about migration. What pulls most migrants to the United States? The thing that pulls them most to the United States is economic opportunity, and that economic freedom and the freedom to move up in the world. When did Northern and Western Europe migrate to the U.S.? Northern and Western, they were kind of the first crew to come. They came in the 1840s to the 1890s. When did Southern and Eastern Europe come? They were like 1890 to 1910. Why did the U.S. immigration decline in the 20s and the 30s? The 20s, strict isolationism. And then the 30s was the Great Depression. What did the National Origins Act of 1924 do? So this was kind of one of our first quotas, and it limited immigrants and it was quota based. And it was quota, but it favored Europeans, immigrants. Now, what technology contributes to counter-urbanization? Counter-urbanization, remember, is the it's weird that jumps to number 30, 31, 32. The thing that really helps counter-urbanization, and my parents would tell you this too, it helps having the internet, being able to have things delivered to your house. You don't have to live close to a mall if you need to get a present for someone or something like that. Number 2, what is an intervening obstacle? An intervening obstacle is when you stop along the way of migrating because something has appealed to you before your final destination. Is appealing, which is a good thing. Now, what direction has most inter-regional migration in the U.S. been? For the most part, it has been it's been directed west, and then recently south. So it's kind of going southwest. What is the intra-regional trend of MDCs? Suburbs. What is the newest one? Counter. What is the trend in LDCs? LDCs is urbanization. And guys, this is because in MDCs, people are starting to be more developed. They are looking for a change in lifestyle. So they go to the suburbs. Counter-urbanization, we have people like the baby boomers who have lived in the suburbs their whole life. Now they actually want to live in the country. Or maybe they live in the city, now they want to live in the country. What is the trend for LDCs? They want to move to the city to seek economic opportunity. How did Brazil encourage inter-regional migration? They moved their capital inland. They moved it inland. They moved it from Rio de Janeiro to Brasilia. Why did the Irish migrate? The Irish came during something called the potato famine. Are refugees considered part of immigration quotas? Think about it for a second. Say your answer on 3, 2, 1. No. What region has the most refugees leaving? What region has the most refugees leaving? It is Latin America. Latin America has the most. What technology contributes to urban sprawl, the spreading out of cities? That would be increases in transportation. Cars and highways help. Now, real quick, guys, I'm going to fly through this because the bell is going to ring in like very shortly, and I'm going to have kids at my door asking to come in. Vietnam, the push factor, war, communism. In Haiti, the pull factor, freedom and safety. Type of migration, they were refugees. In Haiti, there was a dictator. This is the one where it was like Papa something. Again, freedom and more rights. That's what pulled them to the U.S. This was voluntary, though. They did not have to come. In Cuba, we had a dictator because of communism. Again, freedom was the pull factor. And free enterprise. Oh, goodness. I have some kids coming over from Pace. They were also refugees. And then from Africa to Europe, it's because there's a bad economy in Africa. They're wanting jobs in the U.S. Or not in the U.S., sorry. They're wanting jobs in Europe. And it is voluntary. Okay. Whew. Guys, I flew through that as fast as I could. Good luck at the game tonight. Go Bengals.